Hello and welcome to the Daily Newspaper Analysis, an initiative of the UPSConline.com and Ambition IAS. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 16th of December 2017. Now, before starting, I would like to make a correction in yesterday's discussion. At one point of time in yesterday's discussion, during the first discussion on the article on Russia-India-China meet, I had to mention that it was Russia and China who are doubting India's participation in the Quad. And instead of saying that, I mentioned that it was the US that was doubting India's participation of the Quad. Now, this was the first thing. The second thing that I had to correct was that the Quad, at one point of time, I have mistakenly referred to the Quad as an agreement. And you have to be clear that the Quad is not an agreement, but rather it is an informal understanding. This is a slight technical issue because there are many other arrangements globally which are called Quads and Quad agreements. So just to avoid any confusion, Quad is not an agreement, it is an informal understanding. And based on this informal understanding, there is a joint military exercise of 4 countries, that is India, Australia, Japan and the US. So whenever you are writing your answers, you should avoid mentioning Quad as an agreement, which I had mistakenly called it yesterday. So this is an informal grouping. Now, starting today's discussion, coming to the first article, a closer look at the lines. China's remarks on bilateral ties and border issue lay the initiative for corrective measures at India's door. Now, this is an article which is basically on the India-China border issue. So this is a specific article. It is not a broader one which discusses all of India-China international relations or bilateral issues, but rather has focused specifically on the India-China border issue. Now, this is important. Sometimes a question can be asked specifically related to the India-China border issue. In that context, directly this is important. Also, the border issues are pertinent issue in the India-China bilateral relations. So there also this article is of value. Now, coming first and foremost to the context. The context of the article. The context means that why has this editorial been written in the backdrop. So the context is that the issue of border question is again highlighted after the 20th round of special representatives meet between China's foreign minister Wang Yi and India's external affairs minister Sushma Swaraj. Also, the national security advisor Ajit Doval. Now, this was a meet that had started in the year 2003. 2003. And the aim was to resolve the boundary issue along well-defined and easily identified natural geographical features, and also benefit and take consideration of the people in the border areas. So this was a basic aim. Now, the author has written this article in the context that how, despite several initiatives by both India and China, the border issue continues to be a festering one between India and China, between the bilateral relations of India and China. And not only has the problem persisted, it has rather worsened in the current scenario. So several arguments have been given by the author, but the author firstly discusses about what is China's present stand. China has claimed that both India and China are lacking mutual trust. Also, China has underlined the fact that until and unless these issues of mutual trust and harmony are resolved, solving other bilateral issues becomes challenging. Also, recently on the Doklam standoff, which China calls as the Donglang standoff, because China doesn't call Doklam as Doklam, but rather China calls it as Donglang. So, on this issue, China has, even in yesterday's discussion, I had mentioned that how China has called, under the RIC meet, China has mentioned that the incident was caused by India's border troops due to their illegal crossing of China's border. Now, this is an important aspect, that China has not taken the responsibility has not even called this issue of Doklam standoff as a misunderstanding, but rather has accused India of transgressing into Chinese territory. Also, China has stressed that there is a need for enhancing strategic communication and taking practical cooperation steps to restore and establish dialogue mechanisms which are already prevalent. Also, China has mentioned its opinions on the One Belt One Road initiative. So these are certain irritants between India-China relation, and China has been very vocal about them. Now, the author has brought to the fore some other mechanisms, some prevalent mechanisms. One of them is definitely the special representatives meet. Then another is the 10th round of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination on India and China border affairs, which again the author has said is a failure. There's another forum is that of a joint working group for exchanging of maps, which the author in this article enumerates that how this mechanism has also failed, as there have been 4 maps: one which is India's position, second which is China's position, one which states what India believes is China's position, and second what China believes is India's position. So this is an analysis that the author has drawn, and he has said that continuously such mechanisms are failing. So in this backdrop, the author brings out certain issues. Now the issues are that first and foremost, what was China's stance till 1980s? Now, if to understand that till 1980s, China was not the superpower, the rising superpower that it is today. So at that point of time, China had a slightly accommodative policy, and China was open to a solution where India could keep areas in the east while China would keep areas in the west. And the idea was something called the line of actual control plus. This was a policy. So this is some historical perspective, and it is good to know these things whenever they emerge through editorials. Second is that the author has mentioned that the issue is that the present scenario is very, very complex. Now, why is the present scenario complex? Is because China is a rising superpower and China has taken strong stance internationally. There are several irritants between India and China. The energy is a pressing issue. The issue of Masood Azhar's tag of international terrorist that has been opposed by China in the UN, that is an issue. Also, China-Pakistan economic corridor is an issue. Then China's warmth with Pakistan and China's refusal to accept terrorism arising from Pakistan's soil is another irritant for India. Also, China's presence in Bhutan is something that is of concern to India, because China has claimed that China wants to settle its border dispute with Bhutan, which would make India's access to the Doklam Plateau difficult. So this is one issue. Also, the author has mentioned that China has been continuously, making inroads into the traditional influential zone of India. So that is another concern for India. So the entire analysis is that the relationships are on a downward slide. So then that is why resolving border issue has become much more difficult. Also, the author mentions that there is no military hotline established between India and China despite several commitments to do the same. So that is one issue. And also an analysis has been drawn that as development of borders improve because of greater infrastructure facilities, time and again there are chances that the military will be more active, and as a result of which military standoffs could be a common incidence, because militaries will be interacting more because of greater development in the border areas. So there is an urgent and pressing need to resolve the border issue, and if not resolve, at least take some actions regarding that. So the author has often offered certain solutions as well, where he says that stronger mechanism to manage the border areas more effectively to ensure equilibrium. He says that even if the border issue is going to be resolved no time soon, there is a need to strengthen the border area, strengthen the military to ensure effective equilibrium in the area. And also he says that soothing ties for better cooperation in other sectors, as both India and China are rising powers, and it is critical for them to have healthy and better relations with each other for better development. So this is the entire idea. The article becomes slightly specific, so the usage and application is also specific. Coming to the next article, this is an important article because it deals with an important topic. The article, for that matter, is if not biased, I would say it is bent on one opinion. The article deals with the Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Code of 2016. And it is largely, recently there was an ordinance passed, which I'll discuss under the background. But the article is a criticism of this ordinance and the mechanism of the government. Now, it is good from one perspective because it gives you the criticisms to this action. However, it is not a balanced article, and in UPSC, you should be aware of both sides and you cannot have one opinion. I time and again have mentioned that in editorial articles, there is a threat for students to get carried away with one article and form that kind of an opinion. So checks have to be maintained and certain caution has to be maintained while reading these articles, that your opinion should not get totally biased. That is one thing. Now, coming to the article, first and foremost, I'll come to the background. What is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code? In brief, I'll just tell you. Now, we all know that there is a festering issue of non-performing assets with banks in India. It is a big problem for the public sector banks in India. Also, the problem of exit in India has been a major one. This was even mentioned in I think in the economic survey 1 year back, that there is a problem of exiting. The Chakravyuh problem, the chapter was called the Chakravyuh problem. So that is an important analysis. So to solve this issue of NPAs as well as the exit problem, the government has come up with this act, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code or Act of 2016. Now, under this, the government has done away with a plethora of mechanisms for companies to wind up and has ensured easier exiting of companies and individuals who have become bankrupt or have become insolvent. So this is the backdrop of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Some other ideas are there, that it is a shift from judicial wisdom, because initially the cases were under the judiciary. Now a separate body has been formed. So it is a shift from judicial wisdom to now corporate, a commercial wisdom. Also, another issue is that it is a shift from debtor oriented to now a creditor oriented. See, initial laws were basically in the favor of the debtors. Now the laws have been changed to make them more favorable and more prone, more for the welfare of the creditors. Now you have to understand one key point here is that banking and lending is a sensitive issue. So once lending has happened, some protection to the lender is important. If the lender is not safe in that scenario, lenders will not be willing to lend, and if lending will not happen, robust credit systems will not be there, then development in a country can never happen. So this protection to lenders is crucial, and that it is in this entire backdrop that this law was made. Now, 1 year after this law, on the 23rd of November 2017, the government has passed an ordinance, and the ordinance had one provision amongst the many other provisions. The major provision that is being discussed in this article was that there is a mechanism under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code that any commercial institution that has gone bankrupt will be declared for a resolution mechanism, under which the creditors committee, there's a committee of creditors, can put up that institution for the assets of that institutions for sale to recover their loans. Now, once this institution and the assets are on bidding for recovery of loans, a number of people could come and bid. But it was seen that the bidders were basically the promoters of the company. Now you have to understand some nitty-gritties here, that suppose one company has gone bankrupt. Now, it doesn't mean that if this one company has gone bankrupt, so the owner of this company is completely, on road or something. The owner might have a business group may have multiple operations, and one of its group may have gone bankrupt, which is also the case with Kingfisher. Now, we all know that Kingfisher Airlines is what has gone bankrupt in India, but Kingfisher has other organizations which are doing well, and Vijay Mallya, who is the owner of this Kingfisher group, is pretty much under safe havens. So this is one idea that you have to understand. So the issue is that if suppose Kingfisher Airlines, this is not mentioned in the article, but just for your understanding, I am explaining this. Now, suppose Kingfisher Airlines has certain assets, like it has certain aircrafts. So if the banks decide that they are going to sell these aircrafts, so it might happen that Vijay Mallya himself, or maybe some other person who's a representative of Vijay Mallya, might come and purchase them, repurchase them. Now, why would they be interested in repurchasing it? Because the banks have taken deep haircuts. Now, by deep haircuts, I mean that the loans that were given by the banks are definitely not recoverable because they have become the non-performing assets. So the bank has taken accepted that it is going to sell these assets at even lower cost to recover whatever it can. Now, suppose the bank had given a loan of 50,000 crore, and of this 50,000 crore, only 30,000 crore of assets are available with the defaulter company or group. Now, the remaining 20,000 crore is the deep haircut that the bank has taken. This is a decision under the new provisions that the bank has decided that it will only recover 30,000 and 20,000 crore will have to be let gone by the bank. So this is what is the idea of deep haircut. All right. So now the assets that were initially of 50,000 are now going to be sold at 30,000 crore. So this is also, if you see from another aspect, this is also a subsidy kind of a thing, that assets are now available at cheaper rates. So there might be a tendency that other promoters and people who are already defaulters might be willing to purchase them at cheaper costs, and this 20,000 crore that has been left by the government will act as a subsidy for these people. So to deter such kind of activities, the government had made a clause under this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code that people or promoters who have non-performing assets for 1 year, doubtful accounts for 1 year, shall become non-eligible to purchase these assets. So this was a provision in the ordinance. Now the author has criticized this provision. Let's see how. Now, first and foremost, there are the issues that I was discussing. The issue of deep haircuts, I think it's clear. So the second issue is the case of ethics. Now, this is an ethical issue. Last year also, many questions amongst test series and all were continuously being raised under ethics. The question is that should the government bail out these people, because if this 20,000 crore waiver has been accepted, see, where is this 20,000 crore going to come? It's going to come from the public exchequer. And this is a question that should the government bail out these people who have, for that matter, defaulted. This is one issue. Another issue is that there has been a praise for some of these defaulters. Like the author gives an example for the GMR group, which has defaulted on several of its accounts, but the government continues to appreciate the GMR group for its infrastructure projects that it has taken up in India, especially the Delhi and the Mumbai airport. So that is how the issue is that how can you praise one group at one end and criticize them at the other. The second issue is that there was a central repository of information on large creditors. So this is a body, central repository of information on large creditors. This was a body that under the vigil of the RBI since 2014. So the author says that how come the situation worsened so much when the RBI was actually keeping a vigil on the large credits. So that is another matter of concern. Now, another thing that the author has brought to the fore is that the government is bailing out these people on the grounds that they have defaulted on some grounds, on some circumstances which are unavoidable. But the issue is that the government is using this discretion only for big corporate houses and would not do it for people who have suffered, for depositors who have suffered due to this failure of these projects. So that is another thing, that there is some inequality in government's decision. That is an ethical issue. So that is what the author has brought about. Also, the author has brought about the idea of a corporate bank nexus, where the author says that because this was something that is happening from a long time, there is a chance that the banks and the corporates had a nexus, and there is some misdoing here. So the focus should not be on merely resolution, rather the guilty should be brought to the book. That is another point that the author has raised in this article. The last issue here is that the author has raised a doubt on the confidence in the resolution mechanism. Here the author has stressed upon the fact that the resolution mechanism that is being used is basically under this board. There is a, in the background I would like to add something, that there under this code there is something called the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. So this is a body, this is the regulatory body under this code. Now the resolution mechanism is under the vigil of this IBBI. Now in this IBBI there are several committees, and one amongst these committees are the advisory committees. Now the author says that in these advisory committees, the chairpersons, these advisory committees are being headed by some corporate tycoons and corporate heads, and this thing makes the entire process slightly doubtful, because the trust in corporate sectors on issues of resolution is somehow eroded, and this could lead to undermining the confidence in the resolution process. So this is one opinion that the author has said. Now coming to the views that the author has expressed, see, you have to extract the criticism that the author has raised, because you might be provided with an opportunity to criticize this ordinance itself, this the idea of insolvency and bankruptcy itself. So you have to just limit yourself into extracting the negatives, but you should not make this as your sole opinion, because definitely this code has a lot of benefits. It is a landmark legislation, and it is unparalleled, and tomorrow you can have some articles which some viewpoints where experts are enumerating the benefits of this, or even the benefits of the ordinance. So you have to maintain that room for a balance, in your opinion. So the application of this is first and foremost, because this is a technical article, the application is direct in the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code and Ordinance. The second application of this is, as I had mentioned here, is in the ethics paper. In ethics paper, questions are time and again being asked on the bailouts, because bailouts is something that's a global phenomenon. Even in the 2008 economic crisis, there were several bailouts given by US to some of its companies. So this is an ethical issue, that should bailouts be done. It is also an issue of capitalism versus socialism. So this is how this entire issue of bailouts is important. So coming to the next article. Yeah. Now this article I have dealt it, I shall be discussing this article as a case study under the Direct Benefits Transfer Scheme. Now first and foremost, coming to the context. The context is that of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, you all know, is a pressing health issue in India. A large section of our population is vulnerable to tuberculosis, and this is also an issue of global shame for India, because India is having highest burden of tuberculosis patients across the globe. Now there's a relationship between tuberculosis and malnourishment. This is what the article is about, and so to prevent this relationship, the government has been thinking upon overcoming the problem of malnourishment. Now, for this, there were some views that the government should go in for health packages, or some specific food packages. Bring it under the PDS, where tuberculosis patients will be given some incentives, will be given some extra quotas in their food. So those are some issues, but avoiding all of them, the government has gone in for rupees 500, or direct benefit transfer, rupees 500 will be credited. So the analysis is that should this 500 rupees be given, or it should not have been given, or rather in how the scheme should have gone. Should I have, is this a better idea, or a better idea would have been giving food directly to people? And if 500 rupees are being given, will this money be used for rich diet, or it's going to be lost elsewhere. So those are some concerns, and that is why this article becomes important under the analysis of DBT, because direct benefit transfer is something that is being debated, and one of the concerns under direct benefit transfer is that of individual wisdom. That is the money that the government is going to give to the individual. Can the individual apply wisdom in application of that money? So if you are provided with an opportunity, you should use this case study as an example in your answer. Now I would like to suggest one thing, that this article is very specific. See, in UPSC, I doubt if you can ever get a question in the mains that will ask you to analyze the subsidy, or sorry, I'm not the subsidy, the monetary allowance that has been given by the government for TB cure. I don't think that this kind of a question can come, because this is a very, very specific question. But these kind of articles assume importance as examples. Like I have used this example in the direct benefits transfer. Even this example can be used from another perspective altogether, that this relationship between TB and malnutrition has been established. And so you can assert that how food security is important for the health factors of the country as well. So this is how you can use these case studies as examples. So that's about this article, because only the application part of this article is important. The details of this article are not important. Then coming to this article on stalemate at WTO, this is a summary of all that we have been discussing on WTO. That is why I have just brought this article, that you should read it as a summary to the entire conclusion of WTO. We have discussed all these points in our previous videos. One issue that is new, it's not rather new, but a new somehow a different analysis has been brought up, is that we have discussed in the context of US how US and India have not had a warm relations on the global on this stage of WTO. But in this this article has brought out the policy of the President Donald Trump, and how the policy under Donald Trump is highly antagonistic to international institutions. This also I have brought out. So there's nothing much new in this article which has not been discussed previously. So I don't wish to be repetitive. You should go through the previous videos where WTO has been discussed intensively. That is about this article again. Now with this, I finished today's discussion. I thank you all for watching. I hope you'll recommend this program to your friends. We shall be welcoming your reviews and feedback, and hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you.